whirlwind trip.
Okay, let's call the meeting to order. The clock on my monitor says 7:03. Do we have any additions or deletions to the minutes or to the agenda?
One addition is the closed session for grievance 21-139, because we need to make a decision regarding that grievance tonight.
Okay. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
No?
No, I mean, this should have been on the agenda. I'm just curious why it wasn't on the agenda. We knew it was coming, but it's...
Well, we thought we were going to have it settled, and it didn't work out this week. We've had 2 meetings with the union, so that's why. Okay. Anyone else have any additions or deletions?
Nope. Nothing further.
Move right along to the monthly report.
Good evening. So for starters, I'd like to give a warm welcome to our new clerk dispatcher. I communicated with her the other day that she was accepted for the position. She'll begin her training on Monday, the 26th, coming up. She'll be working with Monica Brozick. She's our FTO for dispatchers. I have the utmost confidence in her abilities to give quality training to Justina. She's welcoming the opportunity to work for the residents of Grosse, and she's excited to start her career. So I just wanted to preface that we're excited to have our new dispatcher coming online, and she's excited to accept the offer.
So she's on days for her training?
No, we're going to start her off on afternoons. She is seasoned as a dispatcher with several months in other departments. She will be then transferring to midnights, and because that's our slow time, we'll be using some of that time to be able to go over the policies and procedures and all of our interdepartmental activity that we have going on. So that's the shift that she'll be working.
Well, anyone that has a chance, stop in on afternoons and introduce yourself.
Well, the next item that I want to bring to the attention of the commission is our animal control officer. She received an article in the Grosse Grand. Julie saw a disabled motorist walking down the road. An individual was trying to make a church meeting for the Grosse Arts Alliance. There was an emergency brake issue where the female wasn't familiar with how to release the emergency brake. Julie returned her to the vehicle, remedied the situation, and gave her the assistance that she needed instead of using Richardson's, or it wasn't a mechanical issue, it was just her inability to operate the vehicle. So she gave a glowing review in the Grosse Grand of thanks to Julie for a job well done and for assisting her just as a disabled motorist. So it's nice to see our officers at any time are offering their assistance in hand. Wanted to comment on our eligibility list for police officer. We have 2 applicants at this point. One I would say is going to be declined right off the bat due to some incompleteness of the application and some other factors I don't wish to disclose. So we're down to 1 viable candidate right now that would be going through the process. So that's where we're at right now. We've received other phone calls and fielded informational phone calls from other interested individuals, but they haven't acted upon that as of yet. So we're waiting to see if they move forward. We are competing on a national scale for a deficiency in police officers. 1, because of the climate, and then 2 is that just a lot of retirements and the timing. A lot of people are looking for replacements. So those are the factors involved right now as of to date. The next thing I wanted to bring up, Mr. Jurecki had asked about scales for commercial motor vehicles. That was in a conversation we had a couple of months ago. I did some research on that, and I actually spoke to the the weighmaster with Wayne County, and a couple of other individuals. What's been revealed is that the initial scales, you can have up to 4 scales, but on average, a lot of departments will carry 2. The pricing is about $4,500 per scale, so you'd need 2, so we'd be up to about $9,000 right off the bat. Some issues that were revealed is that our trash trucks now have a dedicated route and anticipated weight loads, so they're kind of familiar with the game to make sure that they're under the weight restrictions right now due to the way they operate. In talking to the weighmaster, there's not really an extraordinary amount of commercial traffic that comes to Grosse. We do have the standalone, Kroger tractor trailer and such. With the Grosse toll bridge, he's pretty much requesting a weight slip that's about an hour old. So whenever you have a questionable load that needs to be recognized, whether or not it would be overweight or underweight, in order to kind of put a validation on that they're going to be underweight, he's requiring that weight slip before he allows the vehicle to go across the bridge. If we move forward into the Wayne County Free Bridge with discussion points, right now the information is that whenever the Free Bridge is completed, that there's not going to be any weight restrictions on that bridge. So we won't be, crossing that crescendo at that point. The other issue is that if it holds true, the weighmaster stated that they do issue special permits that would exceed what the weight limits would be. So it's not unheard of for them to exceed what their certain parameters are based on the need of Grosse, and why we need to get things here and such like that. So in the opinion of the weighmaster, and I didn't use his opinion alone, but each officer would need to be educated and trained in the scales. So they would all independently need to be trained. So however 1 to 5 or 6, whatever, we would have to send them to a school. The other issue would be outside of the school is that they'd have to be familiar with the equipment and be familiar with all of the motor carrier laws. I did a class for motor carrier over a decade ago. A lot of things aren't fresh. I think we really only have one motor carrier officer. Lieutenant, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's Officer Seketeris he brought his training, which he got in Trenton. I believe he was initially a motor carrier officer.
Yeah, he had the training in Trenton, and some of our officers, like myself and yourself, have trained with motor carrier enforcement.
Yes.
But it's been a decade or so.
Right. So there's a lot of nuances to that, but the dollar per return ratio right now, it would be in the opinion of the motor carrier with the weighmaster that we wouldn't really reap a benefit of that, knowing that, to Mr. Jurecki's point, I think his issue is we're trying to increase the longevity of the bridge so that it's functional for an extended period of time. Correct me if I'm wrong. And
right.
With the remediation efforts that they're placing onto the Free Bridge and such, to his knowledge, to date, there will not be any restrictions once the repairs are complete.
And they're talking about the 6 piers or all 11 piers?
I can't comment on that in particular. I'm just saying that he's believing and communicated to me that with the repairs that are done, that there would not be any issues with weight restrictions.
But okay, so that's great. We're Grosse. We just sort of want to help ourselves a little bit. We know it costs Islanders about $6 million a year when that bridge is down. So, if we got some discretionary funds around here from, some of our dealings with the DEA and stuff like that, I think it'd be a great investment. But to your point, if there's no restrictions, then, you can't really pull them over. Although Michigan does have the most liberal bridge laws practically in the country. And our roads are proof of it. Okay, we allow more per axle than any other state.
It's twice
And
any other state.
And that's the reason being is because I was in commercial lending of heavy duty trucks, and they had trailers they called Michigan Specials. And when they left Michigan, they had to put down an extra axle. And so just to comply, to disperse the weight over more axles. So the whole point is we need strategically, I think it's up to us, and you need to lead that as our, acting chief, I think, or the board here, to try to find ways to extend the longevity of those repairs, especially if they determine that repairs are finished when the 6 piers are working on, that they have a formalized plan and budget and contract to fix, because we know that there's 5 that they say that they plan on repairing. Okay, they plan to have a plan and a budget, but right now they don't. And so I think we have to be proactive as a police department to protect the residents of Grosse. And I think the way we do that is, look for ways to be smart when it comes to the bridge and protect it, because Mr. Smoke's real smart about it. That's why there's 2 things, right? Controls the weight, makes sure that there's weight restrictions and speed restrictions, because obviously the impact of heavy trucks going over a bridge is exacerbated by speed, because it's like a sledgehammer hitting you at 20 miles an hour versus one hitting you at 2, and so anyways, I mean, I just think that we have to be proactive. That's all. That's my only point.
And I appreciate that.
And I'm not saying we need to do it, but we need to keep having the discussion, because to me, I think, I know it's a problem, okay? I'm very confident of it myself personally, just in and of itself, that there's no weight restrictions. And we got, if there's no weight restrictions, then, boy, that's problematic to me. That's something probably we need to discuss with Wayne County, because it's their asset, and they got 30 of them around the county that are in poor condition, and they don't have enough money to fix them all. And so they should look for creative ways to preserve that asset. No, my whole point was, if we could help out, a combination of speed and weight, maybe assuming there were weight restrictions because of the fact that maybe they don't get the money to do the other 5 piers, so they say, hey, it's fixed, but it's not ready for 100% no weight restriction type ruling. Then a combination of speed and weight, maybe when we see big trucks coming over, we don't have to pull them all over, but we're a little bit more proactive, saying, hey, you're speeding, you're going 40 miles an hour, and we're going to check your weight. So I think that's kind of up to you guys as you lead your team, Brent. These are the type of conversations I'd expect you to be having.
Yeah, and that's, your points are well taken. I was just wanting to express that things come with a cost.
Yeah.
And if it's discretionary or non-discretionary, with the amount of bridges that we have here, we're focusing on more so the free bridge, let's just say, because the commercial traffic really isn't reaching a lot of our ancillary bridges that we have on Grosse. So according to the Waymaster, those interactions aren't really there, because you're not going to see the tractor trailers at our extremes that would be exercising the bridge restrictions at other points, other than going to our commercial district or down to the airport. So, all of this stuff is negotiable. I'm just bringing the conversation to you so you're aware of what's going on.
These are conversations we should be having, and I appreciate your point of view. I really do. It's just, you have experience, things, you know that Michigan is very, very liberal on their bridge laws, or per axle weight, versus the rest of the country, and we got bridges in poor condition to prove it, and I think Wayne County has 300 bridges, over 300, and how many Waymasters do they have?
Right now, they have 2 in Wayne County.
Yeah. So if we can help them help us, I think that'd be money very well spent, and I think probably 100% of the residents would agree with me.
Well,
I'm sure there's 1 or 2 that would.
And that may be true. I want everybody to be prepared for the expense that's going to be involved. That's all.
Yeah.
The speed limit of the bridge is going to be 25 or 35 when it opens.
That I couldn't answer yet.
That's set by Wayne County, right?
Yes.
And who patrols the speed on the bridge, Trenton or us?
Both, depending. I mean, the line of demarcation is the central span of the bridge. So,
Okay.
depending on going or coming to or fro. So, but and not to take away from Mr. Jurecki's point, the speed can be any of our officers. It doesn't have to be motor carrier. So, I mean, it carries over. So we're really talking about the commercial motor vehicle officer being dedicated to the weights. So, all right.
Yeah, and again, I think it's a conversation we need to continue, that's all.
Absolutely.
And look for ways to serve the residents.
Well, we talked about this 2 months ago, and I brought it back
Okay, you
up.
do. I
so,
appreciate you doing
We
what you
keep it
did.
moving.
We'll keep talking about it. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Any more conversation on
Nope.
that?
What you got?
Okay. Okay, the next item for discussion is vehicle information on mileage. This was a request of Mr. Jurecki also. Just going to have you focus on the 2020 and 2021 odometer readings. And so this just shows our initial vehicle mileage back in 2019, 170,876. Let's just say that's what the mileage was. And then now the 2021 odometer readings, and that's just up to July, up to the end of June. So we're looking 6 months in. So 89,426 miles year to date for our vehicles. So 18, so just over half. So we're kind of right on par with what was last year's mileage for the vehicles.
Yeah, I think this is good. This is helpful. Thank you. And so the one number that I was kind of looking for, because we could have had more vehicles or less vehicles year over year. It looks like we probably had the same, if I'm looking at this right. I haven't had a chance to, was this in the packet?
No, it wasn't.
All right. So to me, I was just looking for, I think there's two things I'd be really interested in. And it would be not so much total aggregate miles, but probably average age of our vehicles and average miles this year versus last year. So if the average age this year is 5, I'm just pulling this out of the air, right? Average age is 5, and the average miles are 60,000. Again, these are numbers I'm pulling out of the air. And then last year was 4, and it was 40,000. Then it would stand to reason that we have a better, more better rationale for replacing vehicles. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
Simply because the average miles are going up. It'd be an argument that I would make.
Okay, well,
But this is a good start, and I think from this you can get that number. It's just adding a column.
I can. I'll just point you to vehicle 16-8. Initially, that was a 2010 Expedition that we purchased. It's, let's just say, 11 years old for all practical purposes. We tried to get at least 100,000 miles out of that vehicle. We ended up getting 106,255. It's just been recently decommissioned, and we have a new vehicle online. That's what that new mileage denotation on there means. It's the new vehicle has 1,348 miles on it. So I can do that, but the problem with what you're asking, Mr. Jurecki, is that some of our vehicle fleet is put on mothballs, let's just say, like our Expeditions for winter. Those will be placed into a non-active state, so that kind of changes things. The vehicle warranties that we have and the way we kind of want to shuffle cars around, the way the lieutenant kind of dedicates the cars to specific shifts, some of those shifts may be doubled up to where 2 different drivers or even 3 different drivers could drive that one vehicle to where another car may be sitting and not active with just 1 or 2 drivers. So I just want you to be prepared because the numbers, there's a lot of variables with what you're asking. So
Let's try to make it simple, okay? Because that's what I'm trying to do. This is just pretty simple. You got a fleet, okay? And when you mothball them, I'm assuming you do that year over year, right? So you mothball, like you put the Expeditions in mothball type, whatever, condition for the summers, and you use them in the winter. So you do that every year, right? So
well, we try, but sometimes maintenance permits us that we have to pull them back out. That's the variables that I'm stating.
So the behavior is consistent, right? The patterns are consistent one year versus another year.
To a point, but
Yeah, so all I'm simply saying is average vehicle mileage of our fleet. Is it
Compared to the
more in
year?
21 than what it was in 20?
okay.
Average age of our fleet. Is it more or less in 20 versus 21? That's all. Just an indication, high-level indication, everything else being equal, which it pretty much is over time, then, you know, that's useful information.
Okay, we will make that next move.
So, real quick, just a comment. I want to make sure we're on the same page, Mike, and that I understand you. I think from other past discussions that we're looking at really what's the age of the fleet versus the cost of these vehicles, because we've talked about replacing vehicles, right? So we're looking at basically, if you look at the 16 and 17 Dodge Chargers, we all know that they're falling apart quickly. They're getting up in higher miles versus the new Fords, which are the 19s and 20s. Is that what we're talking about?
Well, that's exactly what we're talking about.
Right.
So
Okay.
if you said to me, if Brent came to us and said, look at the average miles per vehicle in 21 are less than 20, but we still need to replace vehicles because we have this problem, that I'd say, well, okay. If you didn't have that problem, I'd be saying, why are we doing it? And I'd want you to explain, just like you'd explain sitting on a board, you know, or if you're running a company to the people you're trying to get approval from. And so that's it. It puts you in a position to say, hey, it may look bad that we're doing this, but we got a good reason to do it, so give me the reason.
Well, I did make that aggregate discussion point with the chairman, because I had discussed that if we only replace one car a year, it would take us, 13 years, or I think it was 14 years in our fleet to replace every car.
And I don't care if you do 10,
So-
15. All I'm saying is that would be data points that would help us understand the business rationale for doing it.
Yep.
That's all.
I understand what you're asking, and I can compile what you're asking
Appreciate
for.
it.
Not a problem. Any more discussion on the vehicle mileage?
Thank you, Brent.
All right, thank you.
That was helpful.
Okay, the next item that I want to bring into discussion is incoming calls by shift. I just brought up 2020s for a comparison to 2021. As you can see, our midnight shift, their call volume has increased from 79 last year to 133. Day shift calls are down from 571 of last year to 503 this year. And then our afternoon shift call volume is down from 548 to 428. So this kind of gives you an overview, kind of a 30,000-foot view of the shifts and, you know, how they can change from year to year based on the service calls that are needed. The next item is our incoming call comparison. I just grabbed a few highlighted ones. The last bottom line is the 2020 figures that I'm using as a comparison. The entire spreadsheet is the June 2021. And so as you can see, I don't know if my cursor's working. As you can see on rescues are up 10.8% from 37 to 41. On the fire calls, you can see a significant increase of 34 from 13 last year. And then our general assist calls are down from 753 down to 593. And then our 911 calls are almost close at par, but there's a decrease in about 7.5%, so 7.8% from 128 to 118. And then finally, our total call volume, it's decreased from 1,200 calls per year. And now it's down to 1,061, about a 11% decrease, 11.5. So it just gives you an overview of our incoming call volume and the activity that's taken place.
On a question on that, so June 20th and 21st, we had 11 and 7 back to back on the fire.
June,
I think it's, I'm trying to follow this line across. 20th and then 21st on fire.
on 11 and 7,
Yeah, 11 and 7.
you're questioning the activity?
Yeah, what's going, I mean, something specific on, is that a weekend?
I'd have to
something
review
like
it.
that?
It could have been a storm cell that came through and there was storm activity. That would kind of Any comment on that?
Yeah, that would make sense, Brent. It's probably one of those days we had the severe weather.
I know exactly. It was
Yeah.
that day when those trees all fell down and all the power lines were down. So it wasn't
Our fire
actually
department-
fires, it's actually the
Fire calls.
fire
Calls
calls
for
because
service. Yes.
of the electrical issues, power lines
Exactly
down.
what it is.
Very good.
Another bad weather coming, thunderstorm, Wayne County. 1 hour, 1 minute.
Okay, the next item is our traffic summary. As you can see, crashes are significantly on the increase. For June of 2021, we had 17 total crashes, 2 hit and runs, 3 private properties. Intoxicated operator was involved when the lieutenant does his detective review. That will be brought up. And 4 car deer crashes. I want to bring up that in reference to crashes, and just because they're on the rise, there was a bulletin out from the Michigan Office of Highway Safety and Planning that has referenced that seatbelt use is sharply decreasing. It went from 94.4% in 2019 down to 92.6% in 2021. And those were the results of a University of Michigan study. They point out that seatbelt use is moving in the wrong direction at this point in time, and it's important to turn things around as quickly as possible. They argue that seatbelts are the cornerstone of effective traffic safety strategy, and they must be continued to remain intact for every driver and passenger to buckle up every trip, every time. The survey results just came a few weeks after the Michigan State Police Criminal Justice Information Center confirmed that Michigan traffic deaths peaked above 1,000 for the first time in 3 years. So a significant amount of fatalities. The 1,083 fatalities in 2020 marked a 10% increase from the 985 fatalities that happened in 2019. This has been the most traffic fatalities since the 1,084 deaths that happened in 2007. And so the preliminary statistics that are involved with this study are showing an early pace that fatalities are accelerating. So, not that there's necessarily a correlation with our data here, but, our traffic crashes are increasing. It would behoove the public to make sure that they're buckled up and that there is a noted relaxed effort on the community's side to make sure that they're buckled up.
Still do click it or ticket, right?
We don't receive grant funding for that anymore, but officers are encouraged to do it. The last mobilization that we had was in the month of May.
And what do they attribute the fall off? I mean, maybe the younger drivers coming on aren't as diligent with their belts, or do they?
That's the part of the study that wasn't revealed to me. I will do some more efforts to get that information.
Trying to think of what would make a difference.
It's the lack of enforcement and having a presence out there and taking those violations seriously.
How, just out of curiosity, maybe I just didn't read it. Do we break out tickets for seatbelts? How have our enforcement actions changed?
During that particular mobilization, I believe there were 2 citations for seatbelt issued.
Okay.
Just the last comment in closing with that is that the all-time seatbelt use record was 97.9%. That was back in 2009. And this is the most poignant message, is that every 1% increase in seatbelt use means an estimated 10 fewer traffic deaths and 100 fewer serious injuries. So a 1% is quite a significant number with that.
Is there any correlation in that report, that study, about the increase in the traffic speeds versus the seatbelts themselves?
Increase in speeds with
Speeds,
regard
yeah, just
to
the posted speed limit. So, for example, Eureka, where it used to be 35, now it's 45, and cars are doing 50 down Eureka.
Yeah.
Things like that, where what used to be a divided 127 up north, there, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but that went from a 55 mile an hour zone to 65 now. Just basically across the state of Michigan, our speed limits have increased.
Right.
Anywhere from 10 to 5 miles an hour. So I'm just wondering, was there anything in there or not? That's
Right.
it.
That's a part of the study that I don't have information from you, but
Okay.
I will research it and we'll see if we can get more in depth for the next forthcoming commission meeting.
I appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Just a couple questions.
Go ahead, sir.
So, normally we talk about the deer crashes, right, which we know are up year over year for the first 6 months, about 325%. So I'm sure that's part of your leverage when you're talking to the DNR about getting us those extra fall permits. And I know that that's ongoing, that's covered in a different, it's on the agenda, we'll get to it in a little bit.
Either way.
The one I was looking at though is the hit and runs. Of all the different crashes, I mean, they're 800% for the first 6 months of this year versus last year. They're up 700%. And are we looking at that and saying, man, we got kind of an issue? Or, maybe we should be doing something about that? I mean, how do we define a hit and run? Just educate me on that.
Well, a hit and run could be a vehicle on private property that's at the Kroger lot.
Yeah.
And those happen frequently.
Okay.
So,
Just not good, not that serious.
Lieutenant, if you have anything to
No,
add.
you're 100% correct. It could be somebody backed into a car and left the scene in a parking lot. It could be a crash that occurs on the roadway and somebody leaves. But I will tell you that that's not common for us.
So it's more of an insurance problem than a safety problem?
Yes, and I can tell you that I would imagine at least one of those a month is a shopping cart that hits a car and somebody reports it as a motor vehicle crash.
All right, I just looked at those numbers, and they just kind of popped, and, all right, thank you.
Okay, the next topic I want to bring you to is a self-initiated officer activity. And the top one is the 2020 comparison, and the bottom one is the June of 2021 recent stats. And so just highlighting other citations, officers, just be aware COVID was last year, so there was minimal contact, or we were starting to use a lot of protective measures. So as a comparison, the numbers would have been down. But our citations have increased from last year to this year from 6 to 25 for the month. Verbal warnings have increased from 57, I'm pretty sure that says, it's a little fuzzy, to 93. Our report intake has went from 31 to 35, and then our accident reports, as you can see, and we've already discussed, has been on the increase from 7 to 14. So this just gives you an overview of our officers' activity and the amount of actions that are taking place. We've also instituted mileage, which wasn't on the initial report back in 2020, so we're using that as a factor to try and gauge the miles. There's two schools of thought with mileage. Mileage can be low, but it can be low for a good reason, is that the officers are in the community, they're in the side streets, and they're driving at a slower pace. When I worked in Detroit, you drove with windows cracked and you drove at a slow rate of speed so that you could see what's really going on. I could put a mileage limit or put some factors to say I'd like to see more mileage on a vehicle, but the only thing that would do is have an officer really just hit our main surface streets that have a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit and just, traverse those roadways to try and amp the mileage up. So when I look at mileage, the lieutenant does a review on the officer's activity log to see if it kind of jives with what the mileage is. And so, historically, some officers in the past, and I'm going, a decade or so, would put on 100 miles on a car. But a lot of miles doesn't really necessitate to me that the officer is doing his job in performance-wise. So I just wanted you to be aware of our mileage parameters. There's a lot of variables involved in that, so I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Any questions on that?
No, sounds like you guys are handling that well. I mean, I noticed the variation between officers, and the more important thing is the activity log, what they're doing, so that's why I didn't have a question. But you answered any potential questions I had, so thank you.
Good, I appreciate that. So this is just a highlight. I mean, that was kind of small font. So this is just, the other variables are the officers' road days. So, you can have a certain officer that's on half the amount of road days, and their numbers will be skewed or different than another officer. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the residents and to the commission too. Next one is going to be a highlight of our overtime. As you can see, from June of 2020 to June of 2021, our overtime is significantly higher. And so I have a lot of explanation over that. Right now, we're going through a transition phase where we're replacing a retired dispatcher. So that has increased our overtime. A lot of vacations have been put in for the month of June, so that increased our overtime. Some pre-planning with some training. Understand that due to COVID, there were some training programs that we had tried to get into 3 or 4 times in the last year and a half. And some of those classes that are across the country were put off because of COVID. So whenever we would try and get an officer into a new class that's opened up again, those classes would be canceled again. So one of the most important classes was a active shooter class that we thought was important. And we're trying to send a couple of officers, one from each shift ideally, for this training. It's free, although we do pay for the expenses for the travel, but the class is free, which would be in the commercial category, thousands upon thousands of dollars. Right now it's not really public, but there's been, as of this past Monday, there's been 300 active shooter events since the first of the year. So not to say and put an alarm call to residents of Grosse that we're going to have one, but schools, like our Island Fest, school events, school activities. These are all things that we're preparing for that, could happen to any community. I don't think any community that's had an active shooter actually thought that they were going to be the candidate for an active shooter. So having said that, kind of going around the block to get next door, our overtime is being impacted from some of these classes that we're trying to get our personnel into that we find to be a significant program that will be an asset to the community. So with an additional officer that's been on medical leave, that's why our overtime has increased. I did do a historic study from 2019, and this same month we were along the same lines of overtime. So this isn't an anomaly. This has happened before in the past. And yes, we are using the overtime. The officers are working a little bit of extra this month and next month. And we do recognize that. What I don't want the narrative to be changed from is that our minimum staffing for the police department on Grosse is to have 2 officers on the road. You have always had 2 officers on the road. You have never had that diminished capacity. On great, wonderful days, ideally we'll have 3 officers. On a remote chance, you may have 4. What I mean is patrol. This is not necessarily talking about detective bureau that is available during the daytime on shift, and then administrative staff that's available during on shift. So it's important for me to stress that at no point in time have we went below the manpower staffing for services of the community. We continue to do the same job we always have, and that, we're overcoming some challenges right now with the dispatcher being replaced. We're being challenged with some COVID overlay, let's just say. We're being challenged with training, and we're being challenged with vacation time, which, our officers, I think with COVID, historically looking at last year, I believe it was July that we had our onslaught of vacation time requests. This year, everybody wanted to get out to the lake and out to the up north and stuff earlier. And so June was a hard-hitting month for vacation.
Historically, July is that.
Yes, yes.
So, Brent, to that end, we talked about this overtime numbers at the last meeting, and I appreciate you kind of doing a little bit of research on it. I just went back a few months myself, so fiscal year really starts in April, right? April 1st?
April 1st,
So we
yes.
got, I just went back the 3 months. And so I noticed, starting in April, on a year-over-year comparison, we were at 157% of the prior year of 19, or no, 20, I'm sorry. And then May, it was 186%. And then of course June, it's 176%, 278 divided by the 158 year over year. So we've had a pretty fast start on overtime for this fiscal year. I mean, it's been three months of.
I'm going to back you up though on to April because, well, we're good. Go ahead.
No, I'm just, the thing that kind of, struck me was, did we have a change in our budget or something? I mean, was there a significant change in increase in the overtime budget? Because based on this report, we're at 25%, and that's 1/4. So it doesn't seem like we're really way over, tracking way over. But based on those year-over-year increases for the first 3 months, you'd think that we would be over.
Well, there's two things that are going to happen, is that I have an addendum to the budget which you have,
Yeah.
which will show, well, it doesn't really address the overtime that you're asking about, but our overtime budget, we're going to probably be right on target for overtime. Your comment to, do we increase the budget? I believe we increased the overtime budget with just several
I'm
thousands.
talking year-over-year.
Yeah, I'm talking about overall, though.
I remember like.
Over the years, we've been anticipating the overtime scenario, and they've been budgeting based on past experience as well, rather than take it back down to zero and then explain why. That's the way it's been for quite a few years, Mike.
I understand what you're
It was like that when you were on the commission before.
Your point is taken that there is an increase on the front end. I'm confident that as the months progress, you're going to see that diminish and it'll stabilize itself. So,
Isn't there another aspect of this with some of the grants, right? Like the Stone Garden funding and other things where we're getting paid for some of the OT?
I'd have to, Ruth, is the Stone Garden grants inclusive of those numbers or not? I can't say is the overtime, Ken?
So Operation Stone Garden didn't start until June of this year. And if my numbers are correct, we only spent maybe 50 hours towards that. That is replenished into the overtime budget. So that will not have a fiscal impact on our budget, our overtime budget.
But the question is, and I don't know the answer unless I do some more research, is that 50 hours, let's just say, of a month in that overtime number? Do you
That's a
believe
great
it is?
question because in the
I'm going to have to
past,
check myself.
in the past, that report would have a breakdown of
Show it.
specific grants or
It would
specific
show the
reasons.
grant if we were using it.
Correct. Yeah, so there would be an actual line item for the overtime for whether it's
Garden or whatever.
seatbelt, Stone Garden, drunk driving, or court overtime. There was an additional breakdown. It's just not there.
So I don't know if that's inclusive or exclusive, but we'll get that answer for you. I'd have to check on that. Any questions on the overtime? We'll revisit this again next month. I'll get you some more information. Next item, I just want to bring up a activity with the ACO that she had an assist with DNR Officer Schomburger on June 14th. He had seized 3 fawns that were being kept by an individual without any permit to do so. And she arranged for transportation of those fawns by one of their volunteers to a wildlife rehabber. And that situation was remediated. So I just wanted you to be aware of what Julie's doing behind the scenes. Her shelter donations came in at over 4,400, thanks to the Raise the Wolf activity that took place at Hangar 1, which went well and was well attended. And that we currently have 5 cats at the shelter currently, and 1 dog was adopted And I wanted to bring up this is Detective Vasquez with his new dog. So this was a shelter surrender. The original owners couldn't deal with some of the problems that the animal was exhibiting. Eric worked very kindly with the animal, and he believes he's overcome those limitations or those situations that were a challenge to the original owner. The family has well received the animal. It's a mix of it was a golden retriever and a poodle or something close
Yeah.
to that.
It's a golden poodle.
Oh, what? Golden poodle, okay.
Something to that effect.
Doodle?
Golden
So-
doodle, there you go.
So, Eric did a great thing. He probably wasn't gonna replace a dog, but, this one kinda warmed his heart, so it's, now in the pride possession of the Vasquez family, and we're very happy that he took over that challenge.
We've missed you, Kathy.
And the last thing on the ACO, since I'm up here, I just wanted to. So this just showing our ACO service calls. It's just the number we're after. So her animal complaint calls are on the increase. She went from 277 last year to 333 this year. You can see the surrenders, 23 from last year down to 11 this year. Adoptions, 8 last year and none this year that really have gone through the shelter. Just be aware last year COVID had taken place also. That impacted the ACO and that impacted the animal shelters. Everybody wanted a companion because they were locked in. And so with that, there was a lot of people that were taking in dogs. What we do anticipate now, since things have opened up, is that, some people may be, surrendering those animals, but that really hasn't shown to present itself as of yet. And next thing I'm going to bring up is the budget. So here you're looking at the budget up until, this would go until July 31st, and this was printed on the 20th. So we're looking at that. What I wanted to highlight was that the auditors are in town right now, and then I had caught this morning that our telephone budget. So I just want to explain on line item 301-853 is our telephone. We'd initially purchased some new iPhones for the administrative staff and for the detectives. What happens is that we put in our requisitions at the end of the fiscal period. So by March 31st. So depending on when the bills come in, either after or before is when it gets deducted from the budget. So we had to do a budget amendment for this one because the money that should have came out of the last fiscal budget ended up coming out of this, which was $3,000 and some odd dollars. So let's see, 53. So this new number, let me get you the new one. Yeah, I had an amended budget that I just received this afternoon.
I
but-
have it in front of me.
Do you? Okay, if you could just give me the new line item amount for 853.000 on your telephone. It was 5,075.
2346.
Okay, so what that does is it takes care of the expenses for our monthly service fees for all of our iPhones that we have and the activity for that. So that was one adjustment that needed to be made. And then, Lieutenant, I'm going to ask you one more thing, was the purchase of a commuter equipment, which was the second from the bottom is $96,500.
It's 1506 now.
So from 466 to 1506, just within those small parameters. So there's just a few errors that were caught. Ruth, do you remember what the computer equipment, we talked about this afternoon. It just escaped me for a second.
I can't think.
Yeah, I can get you the information if necessary.
You had a camera that, you know, for.
Oh, it was upgrades to the laptops. That was it. Each officer has a dedicated laptop. They're rugged laptops, and in order for us to continue the warranty on those, we ended up doing a service upgrade, which was $33,000 something, almost $4,000, and that was done to try and extend the longevity so that we don't have to replace those computer systems. So that was for the laptops that are issued to the officers. So those are the amended budget items that I wanted to bring to your attention. Any questions on the budget? Mr. Chairman, it's a line, I mean, it's a point of discussion point for the DARE school liaison, but I can take a seat and we can come back to it, or I can just talk about it now.
Well, it's just, anyone have any questions of the deputy chief on his monthly report?
No.
Okay, motion to accept the monthly report, please.
So moved.
Second.
Favor?
Aye.
Okay, and I got to back up here because Ruth, you're just not keeping a good leash on me. You know, you changed this a little. We forgot to do the approval of the minutes for last month.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could interject, I still wanted to have the lieutenant do his report on the
Oh yeah, we'll come
DB in
back
that.
to it. I'm just trying to catch up.
Yeah,
Okay.
we do need to do that.
Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the June 15th Police Commission meeting?
Motion.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No, I'm caught up. I apologize.
I think you wanted to see me tonight, Mr. Anderson.
No, I was just feeling so guilty about missing the agenda item.
Thank you, sir.
There's a report about
Oh.
vehicle use that was just released from the Office of Highway Safety Planning in relation to speed. Kind of ironic that was the question you asked. Wasn't reading your mind or anything else, but it's just a short article, might give you a hint into speed and seatbelts and crashes and injuries and so forth. Something about the 85th percentile.
I appreciate it.
So first thing I'll focus on is the monthly report for training. As the interim chief explained, we were quite busy in the month of June. Every single one of the officers participated in Narcan training. Our reserves are getting trained in that at the end of the month. So they will be able to equally carry Narcan with them on patrol. Sergeant Carmack attended a week-long active shooter instructor training in New York. He has brought that back to the midnight shift and has started training them, which is a really good benefit for our department. Interim Chief mentioned something about the potential of a critical incident, active shooter event. As you are aware, Officer Benson attended ALICE training with the school district in the month. It was a 2-day, 16-hour instructor school. And then Dispatcher London received a telecommunicator CPR certification. So every facet of our department received some form of training during the month of June. Those were just some of the highlights. The Detective Bureau report, you'll notice that there was a 77% uptick in the number of cases that were taken in the month of June. But I'll just mention that 12 of those were for very minor offenses, traffic offenses, some minor criminal general cases like an open burning complaint and harassment and so forth. So not a serious increase in the number of serious crimes that were occurring. I will highlight a couple of the cases that we've had to investigate during the month of June. There was an elder abuse case that was turned over to the Michigan Department of Human and Health Services, where the officers responded to the urgent care because of an 87-year-old woman that had repeatedly gone in for different types of injuries. It's believed that she might be subject to some type of abuse within the home. Not necessarily that she is physically being abused, but she's not being taken care of the way she should be. We had the detectives that not only obtained an OWI third offense warrant that you have in front of you, some of the details of that particular case, but they also obtained a felony warrant from an incident that occurred in the month of April where we found somebody in possession of the narcotic fentanyl. Case number 213028 was an incident report that I took. A 60-year-old resident lost a large portion of her savings to a scam. She received a phone call, said that somebody had compromised her accounts. She went to Kroger's and purchased $3,500 in gift cards, provided the numbers to the people who called her before she could realize that it was actually a scam. So she lost $3,500, which she probably cannot afford to lose.
Do Kroger and probably CVS, I mean, do they watch for that?
I had a conversation with one of the managers, and they said their clerks are supposed to be aware when people come in and purchase $500 increments on the cards. In this particular case, there was 6, but there was no caution thrown to this woman. She honestly thought that her credit report, not her credit reports, her accounts were compromised, and her way to get reimbursed was to send them $3,500. I know it doesn't make sense to us, but when you're maybe elderly or you can be taken advantage of, and that was the case here. She actually went back to Kroger's to purchase another $1,000 worth, but prior to sending the codes for those cards, she stopped at her bank. And that's where they said, listen, this is not on the up and up. You have to be careful. And then she came to the police department.
My 98-year-old great uncle, they try him every month.
Yeah, I know my mom personally has gotten a phone call from somebody who claimed to be her grandson was involved in a crash and needed money. And she almost fell for it. Had it not been for conversations that I've had with her, she might have sent money. Also to note, we did some alcohol compliance checks to 10 different establishments within the township. We used a 19-year-old decoy, and unfortunately 3 of those establishments sold to our minor. So they were issued, the clerks were issued civil infraction citations, and then the matters are referred to the Liquor Control Commission for adjudication.
I have a question on that. It's my understanding that there was notice put out prior to that we were going to be sending out our decoys.
That is correct.
So it's my understanding, there's no excuse for this to happen.
No. Just as a we don't want to write tickets. That's not our purpose in Grosse. We are not about enforcement. We're about education and community policing. And in this particular situation, I sent out letters to each of the establishments letting them know that we're going to be sending decoys into their places. Now fortunately, 7 did not sell. And of those 7 that did not sell, we had stung last year. So there was a learning experience. However, 3 were still, in violation. So, but anybody who's watching, we are going to go out again, and we're going to check them for tobacco sales, and then we're going to repeat alcohol. And that will be done before the end of September. So there's fair notice that's given. On to mutual aid. We had 1 activation for mutual aid. Our SWAT officer responded to the city of Riverview to assist in a human trafficking case. They were able to apprehend the suspect, and they were also able to save a person who we believe is a victim of the trafficking. Continuing on with community policing, we did start our Marine details in the month of June. We sent out officers under the Operation Stone Garden funding, and we're trying to use this as a double-edged sword to train officers. One of our captains, Officer Todd Brozek, developed a form that we can track how officers are being trained and what they're actually being trained on, whether it's geography, marine laws, safety, or conducting traffic stops or what have you. So we're going to be trying to train officers in addition to just putting them out there trying to curtail people coming into the country illegally or other marine violations. Sergeant Carmack did receive his certificate of recognition from MAD on June 25th. And I know you guys have kind of talked about traffic crashes. I know you mentioned last month, Mr. Jurecki, a uptick in the number of crashes we've had on Grosse. So I looked at some stats that go across our state. From last year, total crashes are up 14%, injuries are up 25%, and fatalities are up 31%. Now, when you look at 2019 and what occurred between 2019 and so far in 2021, total crashes are down 19%. Injuries are down 1%, however, fatalities are up 17%. So crashes are down from 19, but fatalities are up. I think the interim chief alluded to that. We are having some problems on the roadways, and the big contributing factor isn't just alcohol, but it's the lack of people wearing seatbelts. I know there was some conversation about overtime and so forth, and interim chief is correct. We've had a lot of vacation time taken, and we've had a lot of training. Just to throw some statistics at you, in June we had 18 overtime shifts. 13 of the shifts were patrol assigned to dispatch, and 16 days were missed in records. We had 14 shifts of training, so 14 days we had officers out because of training. We also had 20 vacation days, 2 personal days, and 8 sick days in a month. So it's a combination of training and personal time off.
Can I ask a question about the crashes?
Sure.
So I keep hearing seatbelts.
Yes.
So not having a seatbelt on doesn't necessarily mean you're more prone to a crash, but maybe a bigger injury if you do, right?
Correct.
So it's really injuries.
Yes.
Okay, so when we say no seatbelts, then the magnitude of the severity of the injuries is what we're really talking about.
Correct. So whenever a person does not buckle up, the likelihood of them being hurt increases. The likelihood of them being killed also increases.
So my question is, so what are we doing about it? I mean, are we thinking about having some type of campaign, increasing the amount of tickets we give, an information campaign, combination of that, pulling more people over?
Like I mentioned, we participated in the May mobilization for Click It or Ticket. Officers were sent out an email reminding them of the importance of enforcing seatbelt laws. I will say, because I'm an avid person that enforces that particular law, it's difficult in Grosse with 2-lane roads. And it's hard to catch them, but it's possible, it's feasible. I don't know what the seatbelt usage rate is. It's been a long time since we've done a survey, but that might be prudent just to find out. It's just another way possibly to motivate our officers to write that ticket. And the good thing about the seatbelt ticket, it's a reminder. It's $65, doesn't go in a driving record, doesn't affect insurance costs. It's just a reminder to the residents they have to put that belt on.
Okay. Thank you.
Focusing back on overtime, the month of July, 30 overtime shifts are currently on the schedule. 18 shifts of patrol are assigned to dispatch and 17 days missed in records. But we still have a lot of training days. We have 15 days dedicated, or 15 shifts that are dedicated to training. 26 vacation days. So there's 6 more in the month of July than there is in the month of June. We have 8 personal days, but we have had so far 0 sick days. However, we have an officer that's on Family Medical Leave Act, and he's planned to have 15 during the course of July. So August, it's somewhat more of the same, 21 overtime shifts scheduled, but 22 vacation days and 22 FMLA days on the schedule. So I will commend my officers, or our officers, for filling these shifts. We have officers that work 3 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon. We had one of our detectives come in at 4 o'clock in the morning to cover the road, go into the detective bureau and do his duties, and then hold over till 7 o'clock at night to finish. So everybody is pulling their weight. It's difficult being short. But as the interim chiefs mentioned, with Justina coming on board, that's going to alleviate some problems for us. So I hope we get more than one application for patrolmen. I really, that's sad to hear that news. Very sad. Any questions for me? Training? Community policing, SWAT?
I have one question. This is really, it's either you or Brent to answer. It's just something that Jim sent us, the board, that we had a Constitutional Crusaders group come in to the police. I mean, that was this month, recently.
It was.
I mean, can you
Right,
guys
took the report.
tell us what happened on that, or is that a threat, or what is?
Yeah,
They're gonna file a complaint, or?
I don't really want to get too deep into this. It was 4 citizens that came in to exercise their constitutional rights. Their approach was a little disruptive with cameras that they were all wearing upon their bodies and filming every part of the police department, from the outside parking lot, our patrol cars, to the interior of our common lobby area. Everything that they did was within the confines of the law, but their approach was somewhat disruptive. The lieutenant provided them with some documentation that they requested on how to file a complaint, and then they exited peacefully. So the membership goes around from police department to police department and other federal installations and such, and takes the same stance. So they hit 3 or 4 other locations after they stopped by in Grosse.
Is this a national thing, do you think, or is it just?
Well, these individuals are located in the state of Michigan in different areas. But other than that, I'd rather not go any more in depth into that, just for a lot of reasons.
All right, understand. Just curious.
Mr. Anderson, any questions?
No, sir. All right, so
Liaison report.
liaison report. What do we, reserve report?
Reserve report.
Reserve report.
And you're messing this up bad.
I
too.
know.
Good afternoon.
Worse than normal, like 50% worse than normal.
I'm trying hard, though.
Maybe more than that.
I'm trying hard.
First and foremost, I just wanted to introduce myself as Captain Wesley Price of the Grosse Police Reserve Unit, filling in for Sergeant Carmack tonight. I'll be presenting to you the June report. First, I'd like to start off with the events that were worked throughout the month of June. We obviously had the Island Fest, which was 4 nights, which involved doing traffic and the setup and the breakdown of the crosswalk. All officers worked the detail, so we had a great showing for that. One other item that we had a mutual aid reserve request from Woodhaven. They had their city fireworks. Also had a great turnout for that. We assisted them in doing traffic and doing pedestrian traffic as well in the parks and things. So they were very grateful that we were able to assist them with that. The officers are still continuously to do their monthly rides within the month of June. Also consisted of, as we discussed earlier, with weather related. We actually had officers that were on the road that we did have some emergency calls, but we were able to handle that with the folks that were out there doing their monthly duties. One thing that I would like to bring to the commission is that during a monthly ride, this month we had a BOL that went out for a possible drunk driver crossing the bridge. Road officers with 2 reserves, myself and Reserve Sergeant Chris Smith, were able to locate the vehicle. We were able to make communication with dispatch and with the road officers to be able to bring them to the location where the vehicle was. Once the vehicle was stopped, the traffic stop by the road officers, it was determined that the officer was arrested for OWI. Next, I'd like to give you guys the reserve total hours for the month of June, which was 178.5, which also included, we had cadets total hours of 14 hours as well. I'd like to mention that we are accepting applications for the reserves and for the cadet program. Applications are available at the station through dispatch. And starting tonight, recruit Sanad Atala started his academy for Schoolcraft. So That's all I have unless you guys have any questions.
And Mike, you gotta keep beating the
No,
drums.
I
And the township board that, you know, our reserves are
yeah, they do a heck of a
very
job. You guys
underrated
have
or
done a great
under.
job, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
And,
Appreciate that.
You know, what type of, for those people that may be listening on TV, the younger folks that may be interested in something like this, or people that have some extra time, I mean, what type of a commitment is it? Like, I was told this was like a half hour a week. Someone lied to me a few years ago. You know, that was for the police commission. But, you know, what type of commitment is it for you, for someone that's working full-time and they want to participate?
We generally expect that, you know, we have a monthly meeting. We expect folks to be able to attend that. Officers they go out on the road to work the road, which is required a minimum of 4 hours. Most work 8.
Month?
Yes. There's other, you know, the other officers, you know, they come in to ride with.
Us.
Okay, Mr. Jurecki, liaison.
Liaison report. Okay, so the frequency of the bridge meetings with Wayne County have decreased from weekly to once a month, but if needed, they'll be more frequent. Something comes up because construction has started. So far, everything I'm told is on track for end of fall, which is really late December, okay, just before Christmas. I was told in the affirmative that they're adding a second shift. Before it was they were going to add a second shift, but now we're told so. And the other thing was that I thought worth noting that the main Pier 9, the big one with the swing mechanism on it, once they finish that up, they will be able to work on multiple piers at the same time. And so I know that's important to all of you. And also that there was a little bit of a problem with pedestrians walking on the bridge, so we need to be diligent to make sure that it's a real potential danger. And so we got to remain diligent here. The big talk at the last board meeting, of course, is we still don't have a chief of police. We know it was originally delayed because we didn't have a budget, and we were told at the commission level that we were delayed because of that. And then there was a state police investigation that I believe was handed over to Wayne County. I'm not exactly sure when. Brent, would you know, Brent, when that was handed over to them roughly? When that finished? It started in Feb, right? And
That's correct.
do you know when they got county?
I'd have to look it up to give you the exact date. I don't want to commit to that.
I mean, within 30 days, or was it end of April, something like that, or no?
I think that may be close, but I'm not sure.
Okay, but they have it, and we're waiting for it.
Yes.
Right? Okay. So we still haven't gotten that back, and so that's kind of been a holdup. There's a special board meeting on the 26th, and it's to work with the commission, not the commission, actually the board, to go over some of the issues surrounding this process. The other thing is the appointment of Justina Erd was approved, and I guess we're now authorized as well to do some recruiting, right? And I think you mentioned, is that both dispatcher and, was it dispatcher or just, no?
It was the police officer they
Police
reported
officer.
on.
So we only got the one so far,
So
right?
far.
So that is really it. If anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them, but I mean, those are the pretty much hot topics for board related, so.
You have any questions, Scott?
No questions. No
Sure.
questions. Sorry, my mic was off.
Well, thank you. Assuming I'm following the right thing here, school DARE update?
Yeah. Mr. Anderson, I just want, excuse me, I just want to touch upon an enhancement to what Mr. Jurecki was asking about. So, yes, we do have solicitations out for the replacement of a police officer eligibility list, and then we also have a potential retirement of a clerk dispatcher that's also our records clerk. So we are in queue to solicit applications for that also. So
And
I just want to make sure we weren't
We burned
glossing
through
over
the
that.
list
Are we doing better with
getting
the
Justina, right? We don't have any more on the clerk dispatcher eligibility list.
No, that was it. It
She
was
on to
exhausted.
the last.
Yes, so
Okay.
we're starting the process over again.
initial feel? Is there a bigger pool out there than for police officers?
I'm not optimistic about that. Well, I think you're going to run into the same situation as police officer. So, the only thing that I want to bring up with the DR liaison officer is that I had spoken to the lieutenant months ago about this, and
Brent, can I just stop you just
Sure.
for a quick second? So on
Yes.
the police officer, I don't know what time the academies end every couple of years, but are we advertising the academies as well?
yeah, Ruth ends up going to their websites and makes contact with those facilities.
Okay, thanks.
Good, thank you. So with the DARE officer liaison, just
Early.
I just wanted to bring up that this is on our radar. This is in the incipient stages that we're just going to have to, and jump in here with me, Lieutenant, at any time, with just some discussion points. I had a discussion earlier on when we ended up having this transition point about 6 months to 9 months ago about what we're going to do with the DARE liaison officer. It's a passion for the lieutenant, which I commend. Historically, he's had the place of being in the detective bureau and then now as an administrative lieutenant, so there's been some fluidity and functionality with those positions. There's nothing to say that the lieutenant can't continue with that position, but what I just wanted to outline is that it brings some specific challenges of who's going to be in that place if he is replaced down the road. The shift, the operational area where that officer is at, that's the school liaison. Ideally, it needs to be somebody that's on days. Ideally, it needs to be somebody that necessarily isn't committed to the road, that would be committed to, into a bureau, and that brings upon its challenges too on the selection process. So,
I think the key takeaway, though, is the community expects the DARE process to continue because it's been going on for a long time.
yes.
And so I understand what you're saying. And, but the plan has to be that we make DARE continue and make it successful as it is. It's a deliverable for the Grosse Police Department.
And so, this is just a 30,000-foot overview to bring it to the board's attention, that it is a discussion point that, like I had said, we had discussions in the past, and then if there's any transition or if there's anybody that's making movement and stuff, we need to be prepared for those changes. So, this is just an introduction, and then myself and Lieutenant will discuss it further, but I just wanted the board or the commission to be aware of the circumstances and the situation.
But I don't think the community will accept, geez, we can't figure out a way to put someone on DARE this year.
Yeah, no, we'll be able to figure out how to do it. It's just, there's going to be a lot of
Yeah.
finesse and challenges on selecting who that person would be if the lieutenant was to relinquish that. So we're not there yet, but I'm just putting it out there. So the last thing is the deer call update. I've been in constant contact with the Michigan DNR and our point of contact. Right now, I sent him a confirmation email today to give me the certification that we're moving forward with our fall deer call. Right now, I don't have any information that would state that anything has changed, but that's where we're at right now. So I'm just giving an
But our
update.
process is still good and in place.
Yes, yes. So we do anticipate having our fall deer call. That's just going to be a prerequisite of our winter deer call, which will start right after the holidays and Christmas.
So this is incremental, incremental to what we've done in the past. We never had a fall deer call.
We never had a fall deer
So
call.
this is
This is what they
incremental.
call an off-season permit situation, yes. And this is going to help us try and meet the target numbers that we're after that probably wouldn't be obtainable otherwise.
Right. And we know we have to do between fall and winter about 250 to make it down from the herd. Assuming that about half of them are the deer out there, the 350 that we did last year were does,
Yes.
and they multiply it by about 1.5.
Saw a lot
North
of,
of
seen a
250.
lot of little baby deers.
So, just to be clear, I mean, it was just about 200 that we got last year in the call. Was
Yes.
that number?
A little bit more, but yes.
A little bit more than that. So we know we had a good, survey of how many we had out there, and plan on doing that this year again, or no? I think so.
We are. Just understand that the 200 was double of what we've ever historically
That's
done.
right.
So,
And
No,
I
that's
don't
great.
It
think
was
you
quite an
guys have
accomplishment.
taken enough
Yeah, I
credit
think
for
you
that
deserve a lot of
because
credit
it's
for that.
true. Up
Yeah.
until now, we've averaged 90 to 100 a year. And you guys were able to pull off 200 last year, and that's good.
there's about 6 of the deer colors that are very dedicated men, and they went above and beyond. I want to give them the total credit for that. Myself and the lieutenant are just the facilitators and make sure that they have the support that they need. But they've really done exemplary work, and I have commitments with an attachment of about 2 more that would be added to that group that will allow us to obtain those numbers that we're after.
That's great.
Okay?
Everybody's looking forward to it. I mean, as we know, the crashes are going up, right? So
Yeah, that's a paradigm shift that I don't understand, but I can't explain that.
bar continues to move up. So
Well, the deer are just, like they line up almost at certain places. It's amazing.
So we're making efforts, and I just want everybody to know everything is in place. We have no hiccups that we see right now, and so we're moving forward. And that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have any more questions for the deputy chief or the lieutenant? All right, we'll open up for public comment.
And before we go that far, Ruth was pointing out, we jumped the gun on approving the
Motion for a month.
monthly report, so we need a motion to approve the monthly report. So I motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ruth, I gotta come down and help you with this agenda.
It's this new sheet. Talk to Brian.
Okay. All right, Mr. Flavin, you were the first one here tonight. You have anything? I'm sorry, we can't hear you. Okay. Anyone else out there? Kathy? No, Bill was the next one in, or Kathy? Well, Kathy was the next one in the building, but she was in the back room. So,
You talked about the animals, you know that made me happy. By the way, the deer were in my backyard, if you want to catch them.
and it's true, there's a lot, as many as we took out, you're seeing a lot of them around the island. Bill, you have something?
I'd like to talk briefly about the initial discussions on the bridge. And
Is there a microphone there for you, Bill?
it's got a green light. Does that do better?
Put it up to you, yeah.
The way to make this go up, I don't know.
yeah,
How to do it.
No, you're fine.
Oh,
you're
can
good.
do it.
talk
The
into
rain's
it.
just making a lot of background noise.
Okay. I had an opportunity a long time ago when I was insuring businesses to talk with a fellow who had a new technology at the time. It was a van that had a laser in it, and you'd like put a stake at the one end of the road and start the thing up and drive the truck a certain distance, and these waves were bouncing off the road and back up to the receiver, and you'd have a computer design of what the road was doing as you moved along it. They turned around then with that information and we're making adjustments to the quality of the roadbed itself and then the top surface. And the idea was to get it level. And you couldn't quite get it level. If it was a high spot, they literally ground it down. And the reason for that was basically two things: speed and weight. And what would happen is that as a vehicle is going down a highway, if there's a dip in there, it goes down and it comes up and it boom, hits another spot. And if the underlayment there isn't quite right and it keeps getting hit, you've got a pothole, you see. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is we can turn around and look at a $9,000 investment in a pair or an $18,000 investment in 4 scales and the cost of training people to use them. And if you compare what you'll get back from traffic tickets against that as an investment, from that point of view, it doesn't pay much. But if you turn around and literally extend the life of a road or the bridge, whatever it would cost us, what was it?
$500,000 a month.
$500,000 a month. And you're never going to know exactly because you don't know how it wears out, but the return in extended use before a toll was incurred would be huge. I'm of the opinion that that other viewpoint has some merit, and when you're looking at this in the future, you don't know that you'll get it. But if it did happen, if you even saved the road or the bridge or whatever for a month or so, and its cost the savings in tolls, the return would be huge. And I just wanted to make that observation.
Thank you, Bill. Mike, you kind of got lead on talking about that from us.
Yes,
And you're preaching to the choir with him.
appreciate your thoughts, comments.
So, Mr. Carmson.
I'm Greg Carmazin. Yes, I wanted to make a couple comments. First of all, on the deer call, very encouraged to hear that a fall deer call is possible. I was just curious if that's a new program in Michigan, because in the past I had heard that we could only do a call in January, and I was wondering if that's a new initiative or something that's just happened that enables us to do that.
It was the first time that it was asked for by us, and we were, from my understanding from previous administrations, that we were not allowed to do that before. We had asked for the special permit, and they're granting it.
Okay, well, that's encouraging. I know at one point, a couple of times, I think I've talked about the deer call, and other people have too, and there's been some discussion about, could we have a biologist take a look at the sustainability of the number on the island to actually get some scientific analysis that we could take to the DNR, to bolster our points about, what is a level that can really be adequately sustained on the island. And I know some communities have done that type of analysis.
I think just to stop you right there, we started with that years ago, where the guy, and the DNR is the official final word on that expertise.
And he is a biologist.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. Well, because
I can't remember what they said. Mike, I think you knew it the other day, but there's so many deer per square mile, and the real calculation is though the open space versus the housing areas, and
I think the answer is it's a lot less than what we have. A lot less. And right now, the bottleneck is, even if they said you need to take out 500, we may only be able to increase it by, another 50 this year, because we got limitations. So, I think we're not even close to that number. And I think you would agree, Greg, because I know you've done a lot of research on this. I think it's something like 14 per square mile. Well, yeah. Unfortunately, we got 10 square miles, so we got a long way to go.
In the 70 to 80 range 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So we're maybe 400 or 500%
really not that
higher.
Relevant right now, because it's just not achievable. But what we do know is we need to get a lot more.
Yeah. Up until last year, we were just treading water.
Yeah. Wow.
I think we got a chance to make a real dent in it this year.
Yeah. I think there is some level of confusion out in the community about how many deer the island can sustain, and the extent that you can document some. That somehow with some analysis specific to Grosse, not just using statewide analysis or, standard data, but actually looking at gross seal to be
Maybe
able
we
to,
can
because
ask-
there are people on the island that are legitimate, and I'm one of them, legitimately like to see deer, like to see the green space.
You're not supposed to feed the deer.
Believe me, they feed on my arborvitae all the time, but but not by my doing. But anyways, I just as a suggestion that I know that sometimes there's concern about how many deer are taken, and certainly I think we'll all agree that no one's trying to eliminate all the deer, but there is an actual level that is appropriate for a community this size with the land use that we
I'm
have.
sure we have it, and if you could just make sure that the gentleman can give us any updates he's made to that number, because they've given us that number before.
Okay, all right. Just the other quick comment that I'll make is that, of course, I'm on the board of directors of the Grosse Ile Civic Association along with Bill Heil, and we've been tracking the issue of the hiring of the police chief rather closely. And I will say that after the last board meeting, I think there's considerable amount of confusion in the community about what's going on, how this is being done, what the commission's done. My thought is that it would be very helpful if the commission could make a presentation to the board, the township board, in a public session, so that you'd actually understand, the community would be advised of the process that you've gone through and what the ordinance and the administrative policies and procedures say about how it should be handled and what you've done. And I think we have two fine candidates, and I'm not getting into the specifics of which one anyone prefers, but I think there is a very serious issue of process here that is absolutely critically important that it's explained to the community and it's done in public. And to the extent that, it's widely acknowledged, and in fact, it was recognized by Supervisor Budney in the motion that was on the agenda for the July 12th meeting, that there's a memorandum that the township manager has produced, which is, as I've been told, is rather controversial. It has some allegations about the activities and motives of the police commission that I think you have an obligation to explain to the community and do it in public so that we understand exactly what's going on, because otherwise there's going to be a great deal of confusion and mistrust that comes out of this process if this is all done in closed session. So I would just encourage you, if you haven't made the formal request, to have a opportunity to brief the board, that I would suggest that is something that should be done. It should be done in public because that memo being referenced on a motion makes it a public document, and any response to that would also be a public document. And I think I think those documents have to be made available to the public.
And we share a lot of your concerns. We share all your concerns about getting this thing settled, but the people that control it are the ones that sit here on the first and third Mondays. And we're working with them. I've spent way more time than I ever wanted to in Mr. Budney's office. So, and Mike is our liaison. But obviously there's a lot that can't be said right now because it's not our place to say it.
I think, a lot of us support transparency and encourage it because, and some don't. And then there's rules that you have to deal with as well, right? Open Meetings Act and so on and so forth. So, and confidentiality. So, you make good points. I have no issue with open meetings on this, but it takes 4 votes. So
Okay.
that's the reality.
Just remember, we have 0 votes. Well, we have Mike.
Well, I understand that, but I think it's important for the community to understand that you have made the offer to brief the board in public.
I think
Correct.
that's been communicated or stated a number of times since February.
Okay. And that would be certainly true of any, you would provide any documentation that is appropriate to provide to the board for a hiring process would be, inherently a public document that, would come from making a decision on a hire. That would be inherently a public document. And
as this gentleman to my left will tell you, because he is a lawyer, he doesn't want me trying to be a lawyer. So what's a public document, what's not, I'm not the guy to answer that.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying that it's my understanding when you make a motion in a public meeting to hire someone based on a document, that document itself has to be made public.
I have
Well,
no
put
comment
it this
on
way.
that because
Do you know of
that
any
is not
reason
my
why
expertise.
that wouldn't be made public? I mean, does any...
Answer. The guy that I ask is Mr. Assorti at this point.
But
He's
you
the only
haven't
one that
been
can
provided
speak for
with
the
any...
township.
You haven't been provided with any guidance that any of the documentation that you have on...
It depends on your definition of guidance.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Oh, we appreciate your concern, and we appreciate your trying to educate the public on the island. Okay, any other public comment? Anyone at the table here have any closing comments?
Nope. It's good to be back in person, though.
Yeah, how come the township isn't back in person? I wanted to ask that.
That's not my decision. I think we should have been back in person.
I thought the township was back in person as of June 1st or something. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
Anyway, and that's some of the things we're dealing with. If you're doing your job better, Greg, that stuff would get fixed. All right.
Just quick question, quick comment. We added to the agenda going into closed session tonight, and Mr. Ranka asked as to why it wasn't on the agenda. And I think it's important for the community to know that there was a grievance filed within the police department. The grievant requested closed session, closed hearing, which is his obligation and his right to have a closed session. We've been working since approximately June 13th to resolve that grievance without having to render a decision as a commission, because we were trying to essentially resolve it as a mediation so that it didn't get elevated to the next session or the next step in a grievance process. Unfortunately, we were unable to resolve that as of yesterday, which now requires that we had to add the closed session to deliberate and determine the grievance in the closed session, which is why we added that to today's agenda at the last minute. I apologize to the community for having to do that. However, we have already been granted 2 extensions by the union time-wise, and they were not going to grant it any further. So unfortunately, we had to add it to today's agenda. And unfortunately, we were unable to resolve it without having to deliberate on it. So with that said, that's why last minute it was added, because this was actually as of last night. I was out of town. I think it was about 9 o'clock last night that we came to the realization that we were just spinning our wheels and not getting anywhere, and we had to have a determination by the end of business tonight. So with that said, I have nothing else for comment for today.
Motion to close the public meeting and go into closed session.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you, people. Thanks for coming. Let's take a short break and hopefully not be here till midnight.
Enjoy.